This is Platform Diaries with Shane Williams, who chews the fat with entrepreneurs, startup founders and thought leaders on what it takes to traverse the wall between startup and scale up.
Do you find investment terminology confusing? Seed, Series A, Series B? It seems to be a lot of ambiguity and BS getting around. My guest today aims to close that down. You're listening to Platform Diaries, and I'm your host, Shane Williams. Cam Walshe is an entrepreneur come investor with Pitch VC. We discuss what the different investment rounds mean, what investors are looking for in a startup, some of the common mistakes that founders make when seeking investment, and Cam's advice for attracting the right investors. I trust you'll enjoy the interview. So Cam, thanks for joining me on Platform Diaries.
Thanks, Shane. Pleasure to be here.
Mate, now, as I said in the intro, today's episode is all about trying to demystify some of the startup investment jargon that gets played around the place. And I think it's an important conversation because when I came into the scene not too long ago, I was hearing all these terms that didn't make a hell of a lot of sense. And if I'm reading stuff that comes out of the US, it seems to be pretty structured. Like I can kind of tell this term means this and that and the other. But when I talk to people in the Australian ecosystem, it kind of feels like it's a little bit more fluid and maybe some of the things don't mean the same thing that they mean elsewhere. And it also seems like not just ambiguity, but also a fair bit of just flat out BS getting around. And so given your experience as an entrepreneur and a startup founder come sort of VC investor, I'm hoping that you'll be able to help me kind of, derive some signal from the noise. So maybe I'll just dive into the first question, which is, if we look at the kind of definition of the investment rounds as a place to start, and, I've seen announcements about Series A's, right? And some of these Series A's are based on valuations of like 80 million. And then other Series A's are based on, Series D's are based on valuations of far less than that. And
totally.
I don't know, if someone says, hey, I'm at Series A, how do you even get a sense of what that means? So I suppose my first question to try and boil it down is, what do the investment stages actually mean?
Look, it's a really good question. There's a couple of ways in which you can look at an investment stage. One is where you're getting the capital from, and the other one is what you're using the capital for. Now, in Australia, we're a much more immature startup ecosystem, so we're kind of finding our feet, we're learning. We've progressed a lot and we're amazing as a startup ecosystem now, but you're exactly right. And the valuations are even crazier than what you've described. So sometimes it's over $300 million for a Series A. You sort of mentioned an example of one that we've been involved in, or I've been involved in Mr. Yum, and raised over nearly $90 million raised $90 million for their Series A, not even valuation. Mm-hmm. So, and then others, we get founders pitching to us every week that are sort of raising $1 million at their Series A. But you can have some general guidelines to look for. So typically, if we're looking at where you get your money from, if you're a pre-seed, it's founders putting in money, it's friends, supporters and family, maybe a little bit of angel at pre-seed stage. If you then go to seed funding, once again, it's friends, families. You then start looking at incubators, definitely angels at that stage. And then Series A, you start looking at more institutional investment. While some angels and some friends might come along that journey, your primary capital is coming from venture capital or corporate venture, etc. Then you're looking at what you're using, and then it goes on for Series B and Series C. You just get sort of more VC after that. Then you're looking at what you're using the actual money for, right? And so pre-seed is all about getting the idea started. Seed is about market research, further product development, building out a team. And then Series A, you're looking really for building out that strong track record, business strategy, etc. And then it goes on just growing your business more, Series B, C, D, etc. But in the end, it's all just labels. And even the rounds themselves aren't packaged together as nicely as it is on a bit of paper. So a pre-seed round might span 9 months, and you might have sort of 3 or 4 different sections of that where you might have 100K come in 1 month, and then 4 months later you might have 300K come in from a couple of investors, and then 9 months later you might have 200K, and you package it all together and you say, oh, my pre-seed round was 700K. It's about, what message do you want to send out to the market? What are you using the capital for, and where you're getting that capital from?
So then is it kind of safe to say that when you get into the way you kind of described it, once you're hitting series, you're ready for growth versus proving the point?
You're definitely, absolutely. That's the main objective. I mean, at all points in time, seed as well. At all points in time, you're trying to grow, right? But definitely, that's where you really pump in that sort of scale growth. When that sharp lift in the hockey curve is when you're getting to that series for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason I found it so confusing when I first got into the scene was, you go to some of these investment conferences, if you like, and there'll be people there who are first-time founders who are at idea stage, and they're like, oh, I'm hoping to raise a Series A. And you're like, okay, that's interesting, because that guy over there said he's on Series A, he's been running for 4 years. And
yeah.
So I can imagine people coming in will be just like, what does this even mean?
Totally.
Now, you mentioned Mr. Yum, which I think is an interesting one. So maybe I could ask you to just reflect on that for a second. And I guess where I want to go with this is kind of in terms of approach to investors, like when they're going after investors, what is it that made them attractive? I guess what I'm trying to derive out of that is, for people listening, what does good look like and why?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's lots of different reasons why founders invest. There's a couple of main ones for Mr. Yum. One is the team. They had a really great team, great founding team, Kim, Kerry, Adrian, Andre, and then a great early hires. So the team, first and foremost, because they had the ability to be able to deal with issues as they came and then be able to capitalize on the market at that particular time. So team first and foremost, especially in the early days. So you're talking about pre-seed, seed, their seed rounds. The investors were looking at the team and going, they're amazing. Next to that is the market. And what is the market doing? Where is it at? And interestingly enough, if you look at the pre-seed and seed rounds of Mr. Yum, more so the pre-seed round, a lot of them were people in the hospitality industry or businesses in the hospitality industry. And so they had a clear sort of look at the market and understanding of the market and where it might head and the issues that are arising in the market, as well as the size of the market. And then I think the big one, which allows them to raise the type of money that they did, is the momentum that they're able to gain from that. And really, momentum is a lot about sort of the team and the market, what the results of that is. So like a simple sum might be team times by market equals momentum, right? Because the team is the one that creates the momentum in the market. And they were able to do a whole bunch of things, and there's no doubt timing of COVID and all that kind of stuff played into their momentum, which big sort of market factors that happened. But also, you've got to have the right team, the right strategy to be able to take advantage of what happened, what's happening in the market. It just doesn't automatically happen for you. And they worked really hard. They were super smart to be able to take advantage of the conditions at the time.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I know I've heard Kim talk about her story before in a couple of different forums, and it could easily have gone the other way with the wrong team. The market changed, right? If you think about their early product being menus in store, and the market goes, well, there is no store, you can't have one. Right. The wrong team could have gone, oh, well, that's it, shut up shop, like we've got no market.
Absolutely.
As distinct from, hey, this is actually an opportunity. That, I suppose that's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And as you sort of point out, just to sort of emphasize what you say there, is overnight, because of lockdowns, revenue went to zero, literally overnight, because all the hospo venues were shut. And so they, as you say, they could have absolutely shut up shop, and that was an option. No doubt it was an option that was discussed, but they sort of rallied, used other strategies. They helped a lot of the hospo venues during lockdown when they didn't need to, and was able to build, strong rapport and traction with customers for doing that.
Yeah, right. And so, on that theme of, seeking investment and what does that look like and how do you attract it? I mentioned in the intro that you're not only an investor, but, you had also an entrepreneur and, founded your own startups. So I can imagine you've probably got stories of kind of mistakes made from both of those lives without outing yourself or anyone else specifically, just kind of reflecting on what you've seen generally. What are some of the common mistakes you see happen when people are looking for investment?
Yeah, I think that once again, I'm going to sort of focus on the sort of pre-seed, seed, up to Series A kind of thing, because that's where my sort of specialty lies, and that's where I've raised capital, and that's where I invest as well. The biggest mistake that I see is just really targeting the wrong investors for the wrong stage at the wrong time, and having unreasonable expectations from investors, and also how long it takes to raise capital. So, a couple of common mistakes which I see definitely made in the early days is you go and speak to 2 or 3 or maybe 10 investors and you get some interest, and all of a sudden you go, oh, cool, I'm going to close these investors and get them in. And, 1 month goes by, 2 months goes by, 3 months goes by, and you think you're close in getting them. And then the investor, for whatever reason, decides not to invest, and you've wasted 3 months, you're running out of capital, and you've got to sort of start that capital raising process again. Investing is similar to sales, right? And it's just about selling your company, selling your shares. And so sales, it's about a numbers game, but it's also about targeting the right type of people. And so you got to look at the stage, where you're at, what you're doing with your company, and then you've got to target the right type of investor, and you've got to target a lot of them. So we talk about, having 200 or so investors that you're bringing along the journey with you. And I didn't understand that in the early days. And then you do it enough times and fail enough times, you kind of realize that you're doing something wrong. And then the times that I've had success, it's really about talking to lots of people and talking to the right people. Capital raising is a lot about building trust. And there are a number of ways in which you can build trust with investors. One is through personal relationships, which is why at pre-seed and seed stage, a lot of it is family, friends, and angels, because they're personal relationships.
So I guess to summarize, it would be you need a fair depth of number of people who are the right types of investors. I think that was the early point you made about not just anybody. And then not counting your chickens before they hatch is probably the other thing to tease out of that. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. Spot on there.
Right. So then I guess knowing what you know now, if you were talking to your previous life self, what would be that kind of morsel of advice you'd give yourself in terms of approaching, investment and investors?
Yeah, well, one would be to always be raising capital. So always having those conversations, always building relationships, always be developing trust, because you never know what's going to be around the corner, when you're going to need capital. And then B, it just takes a while to build trust and get investment over the line. And it takes a while to build traction as well. So even though, for example, a VC might not be interested in investing in a pre-seed round or even a seed round, it's really good to start building that trust and building that traction. So at Series A, when maybe they're more likely to invest, they've been able to see you on the journey. Yeah, I'll tell you a little funny anecdote that we had just this week, and it happens regularly. But we had a founder reach out to us at Pitch Venture Capital, and part of our process is, the very first initial part of connecting with us is you fill out an online form, because even though we would love to speak to every founder, it's just not possible. Like, we literally get 70 to 100 applications a week, and so we have this little automated process where we ask founders to fill out an online form. And then the one founder sent us this really nasty message about us not being personal enough. And Rosie, who looks after our deal flow, she messaged the founder back and said, sorry, we'd like to talk to everyone, but this is the start of our process, and then we'll have a chat to you, once. And then he sent us an email saying, go fuck yourselves. And which is like, it's a really interesting perspective where it's this, where, a founder is coming to us to invest in them, but treating us disrespectfully at the same time. We try to be as respectful with founders because they're the people that we rely on for our success as an investor. And so we try and be as respectful to everyone as possible. And I think, having unfair expectations and then disrespect to people that you're looking for money for is an interesting way to go about it. I can understand a founder's frustration in it, but at the same time, you never know. Like, we could have invested in his company. We're definitely not doing it now. But even if we wasn't going to be now, it could have been in a year or it could have been in 2. So it's about keeping those relationships, building that trust with people that you work with.
And I imagine you talked about it being an immature market, but I imagine it's not a massive market in terms of investors either. So I'm assuming word gets around pretty quickly if you're the guy that abuses the investors or potential investors.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're spot on.
Cool. So when you're not getting, sworn at and trying to deal with 70 inquiries a week, what's happening at Pitch?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're sort of an emerging, not sort of, we are an emerging venture capital fund. So we're super new. We started in August last year. Really, the exciting things that are happening at Pitch is, well, it's less about us and it's more about the startups that we're investing in. We've made our first 8 investments. We're looking to make a couple more over the next couple of weeks. And we've got some really exciting companies that we've invested in. There's one that's called Networks X. They're a super exciting sort of research company. And they monetize experts' time. So think about a sort of a big investment firm or a hedge fund. They're looking to make an investment decision. And their philosophy, Networks X philosophy, is that 90% of the world's knowledge exists in people's minds. The internet has a lot of knowledge, but 90% of it is just in people's heads. And so when a big investment firm is making investment decisions, part of their due diligence is by speaking to experts in the industry. So it might be an ex-CEO of a company they're looking at investing in, or the CEO of a competitor, for example, or anywhere down that value chain. And so Networks X connects the investor or the consultant to these experts. And it's a great business. They started in October last year. We did a pre-seed. We did the pre-seed investment into them, and then we're leading their seed round that they're raising at the moment, which is super exciting. And then we've got another one, Auto Repairs Direct, which is disrupting the auto industry. So when you take your car to the panel beater, needs a new part, they call around looking for that part, in a very sort of traditional way. Auto Repairs Direct is a sort of a marketplace for that, so it can be easily found. Once again, we invested them in their pre-seed round. They're looking to do their seed round at the moment, which we're hopefully going to be involved in as well. But they're great founding team, doing great things. I think 1.8 mil of revenue this year, so super exciting, those couple of companies. And then another one that we just did, one called Polypedia, which is like the Wikipedia or Google for politics, and trying to create transparency and trust in our political system by allowing easy access to information about politicians and political parties. And so they're a super exciting startup and a great founding team led by 3 amazing women who've got great experience and super passionate about the space that they're in. Unfortunately, venture capital firms are quite boring, but it's the startups that we're involved in which are quite exciting.
Indeed. And mate, I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. We'll put some information about Pitch in the show notes, and we'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shane. It's been a pleasure, mate.
You've been listening to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams. To find out about how Shane enables digital businesses to scale, please visit shanewilliams.com.au. Thank you for listening.